Wife's coworker called me Clueless on the phone, so I waited until she was asleep to check her messages and found out they had been having an affair for 6 months and making fun of me. Let's start the Today story. John Miller, a 35-year-old software engineer from Austin, Texas, had always believed he was living the perfect life. Married to Emily for 8 blissful years, their relationship seemed to embody love, trust, and stability. Despite his demanding career, John always made time for family, cherishing every moment spent with Emily. Whether it was their weekend hikes at Lady Bird Lake or quiet evenings binge-watching their favorite shows, John believed they were a team, partners in life and love. His routine was a balance of hard work, devotion to his wife, and the occasional self-care moments he enjoyed. Everything felt solid, until one evening when an unexpected phone call shattered his sense of security. While working late in his home office, John's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, but eventually answered, only to hear a voice he didn't recognize immediately. The man on the other end of the line, later identified as Emily's co-worker Mike, chuckled mockingly before uttering the words that would haunt John. "Man, you're so clueless." Before John could respond, the line went dead. The comment lingered in the air like a bad omen. At first, he brushed it off as a prank or a misunderstanding, but the tone of Mike's voice and the peculiar choice of words left John uneasy. Why would a co-worker of Emily's call him clueless? What was he missing? The question burrowed into his mind, planting the first seed of doubt in a marriage he had never thought to question. Rising suspicion, 2 to 4 minutes. In the days following the unsettling phone call, John couldn't shake the strange comment from Mike. The word clueless echoed in his mind, and though he tried to dismiss it as a cruel joke, doubt began to creep into his thoughts. His once steadfast trust in Emily now wavered, and he started to notice subtle but troubling changes in her behavior. Emily, who had always been attentive and present, seemed increasingly preoccupied with her phone. She spent long stretches of time texting, her screen tilted away from John whenever he entered the room. Previously open and transparent, she now shielded her device as though guarding a secret. Her once predictable routine also began to shift. Emily started coming home later than usual, offering vague explanations about work deadlines or impromptu team meetings. When John asked for details, her responses felt rehearsed, her tone defensive. The warmth that once defined their conversations had been replaced by a growing emotional distance. Emily was either irritable or dismissive, brushing off his attempts to connect with her. As the days turned into weeks, John found himself replaying the phone call repeatedly in his mind. Was it really just a prank, or was there something deeper at play? He remembered Mike's mocking tone and how deliberately he had chosen the word clueless. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on John, leaving him torn between two conflicting instincts. On one hand, he wanted to trust Emily, the woman he had shared so much of his life with. On the other hand, the signs he observed didn't add up, and his gut told him that something wasn't right. This growing inner conflict consumed John. He wrestled with questions about the nature of his relationship and his own judgment. Was he imagining things, or was there truth behind his suspicions? The doubt planted by that single phone call now loomed over every interaction with Emily, creating a rift he couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, John felt like a stranger in his own marriage. His unease deepened, and the need for answers became impossible to suppress. Decision to investigate, 2 to 3 minutes. John's growing unease reached a breaking point one quiet night. As the clock ticked past midnight, he lay awake in bed, his mind churning with unanswered questions. Next to him, Emily slept soundly, her phone resting on the nightstand within arm's reach. The memory of Mike's mocking words, combined with Emily's recent behavior, gnawed at him relentlessly. Though he had resisted the urge to invade her privacy, the weight of his suspicions now felt unbearable. He reasoned that the truth, whatever it was, might finally bring him the clarity he so desperately needed. After moments of internal struggle, John sat up quietly, careful not to disturb Emily. His heart raced as he reached for her phone. For a brief moment he hesitated, wrestling with guilt over what he was about to do. But desperation overruled his reservations. Unlocking the device, he began scrolling through her messages, hoping to find nothing and feel foolish for his doubts. What he discovered, however, shattered his world. The messages painted a damning picture. Emily had been involved in a 6-month-long affair with Mike, the very coworker who had called him. Their exchanges were filled with flirtation, intimate confessions, and vivid details of secret meetups. Each text confirmed his worst fears, unveiling a betrayal that had been unfolding right under his nose. As if the affair itself wasn't painful enough, some of the messages were cruel. John read in disbelief as Emily and Mike mocked him openly, calling him naive and clueless. Their laughter at his expense burned deeper than he could have imagined, turning his sorrow into a mix of anger and humiliation. The image of his once perfect marriage crumbled before his eyes as he sat there in the dark, phone in hand, grappling with the enormity of the betrayal. This moment marked a turning point for John. The suspicions he had harbored for weeks had now solidified into undeniable truth, leaving him with no choice but to confront the painful reality of his wife's infidelity. Sitting alone in the dim glow of the phone screen, John's emotions erupted in a tidal wave of shock, anger, and heartbreak. His hands trembled as he stared at the messages, unable to believe what he was reading. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow, leaving him breathless and disoriented. Emily, the woman he had loved and trusted with every part of his life, had been living a double life, sharing her affection with another man while mocking him in private. The depth of her deception felt like a knife to the heart, cutting into his very sense of identity. In the hours that followed, John's mind became a whirlwind of memories and realizations. He replayed every moment of their marriage, searching for the signs he had missed. Images of their life together flashed before him, Emily smiling as they exchanged vows, their shared laughter during family dinners, and even her recent distracted glances at her phone. He recalled the unexplained late nights, the vague excuses, and the emotional distance that had crept between them. What he once dismissed as harmless quirks or work stress now felt like glaring red flags. As the memories flooded in, so did a torrent of self-doubt. John began questioning his own worth and judgment. "How did I not see this?" he thought bitterly, berating himself for being so blind to the truth. The mocking texts rang in his ears, reinforcing his fear that he had been nothing more than a fool in Emily's eyes. He wondered if he had failed her in some way, if he wasn't attentive enough, loving enough, or successful enough to keep her happy. The self-blame consumed him, making the betrayal cut even deeper. Yet, beneath the sorrow and self-doubt, anger simmered. He couldn't ignore the sheer cruelty of their mockery, the way they had turned his love and trust into a joke. It wasn't just the affair that wounded him, it was the deliberate act of diminishing him as a person. This realization fueled a mix of grief and rage, leaving him determined to confront Emily and demand answers. For now, though, John sat alone in the silence, trying to process the wreckage of what he once believed was an unbreakable bond. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent grappling with heartbreak and anger, John made the difficult decision to confront Emily. He knew that an impulsive outburst in the heat of the moment wouldn't serve him or the situation. So he resolved to approach the conversation calmly, despite the storm of emotions churning inside him. As Emily moved through her morning routine, oblivious to what he had uncovered the night before, John silently prepared himself. When the time felt right, he asked her to sit down, his voice steady but firm, betraying none of the anguish he felt. Looking Emily in the eye, John presented the evidence he had found on her phone, the messages with Mike, the damning details of their affair, and the mocking comments they had shared about him. He laid it all out plainly, giving her no room to deny or dismiss the truth. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air as Emily's expression shifted from confusion to shock. At first, she tried to deny everything, insisting there must have been a misunderstanding or that John was reading too much into the messages. But as John continued to press her, her defenses crumbled and guilt began to show in her tearful eyes. Slowly, she admitted to the affair, though not without attempting to justify her actions. Emily claimed that she had been feeling neglected and dissatisfied, blaming the pressures of work and the growing distance between them for her choices. She tried to shift some of the blame onto their marriage itself, suggesting that she had felt unfulfilled and overwhelmed. Her apologies came in a torrent, filled with regret and promises to make things right. She begged for John's forgiveness, insisting that the affair had been a mistake and that she had never intended to hurt him. Yet her words rang hollow in John's ears. While he listened, he couldn't shake the images of their betrayal or the cruel laughter they had shared at his expense. The confrontation was raw and painful, laying bare the cracks in their relationship that John had never noticed before. It was a moment of truth that left them both reeling, forcing them to face the reality of what had been lost and what, if anything, could be salvaged. In the days following the confrontation, John found himself at a crossroads, grappling with the aftermath of Emily's betrayal. The weight of what he had uncovered bore heavily on him, and he knew that any decision he made would shape the rest of his life. He spent countless hours reflecting on his options, torn between staying to try to rebuild their marriage or walking away to start anew. The love he had once felt for Emily still lingered, but it was now overshadowed by pain and mistrust. Seeking clarity, John reached out to the people he trusted most, friends and family who knew him well and could offer unbiased advice. He also considered speaking with a therapist, someone who could help him navigate the complex emotions he was experiencing. Through these conversations, John realized that his decision couldn't simply hinge on Emily's apologies or promises. It had to come from an honest assessment of whether their relationship could truly recover and whether he could forgive her without losing himself in the process. Ultimately, John made his choice. If he decided to leave, it wasn't out of anger, but rather a recognition that their marriage had been irreparably damaged. He knew that healing would take time, but he committed himself to a journey of self-growth, focusing on rebuilding his life and rediscovering his happiness. He embraced activities and hobbies he had neglected, strengthening bonds with friends and family, and eventually opening himself to the possibility of new relationships. The experience taught him the importance of valuing his self-worth and not settling for anything less than mutual respect and trust in a partnership. If John chose to stay, it was only under strict conditions. He set clear boundaries with Emily, demanding full accountability and transparency. Together, they sought counseling to address the issues that had led to the affair, delving into the cracks in their marriage and working toward rebuilding trust, one small step at a time. It wasn't easy, and John made it clear that any further betrayal would mean the end. Despite the challenges, he was determined to give their relationship a second chance, provided Emily demonstrated true remorse and a commitment to change. No matter the path John chose, the experience left him profoundly changed. He came to understand that trust, once broken, requires immense effort to repair, and sometimes even that may not be enough. The ordeal reinforced the importance of self-worth and personal integrity, reminding him that his happiness and well-being should never be compromised, regardless of the circumstances. In reflecting on his journey, John hoped his story could serve as a lesson to others. He emphasized the importance of paying attention to warning signs, trusting one's instincts, and valuing oneself enough to demand honesty and respect in any relationship. Whether he moved on or worked to repair what was broken, John found solace in the fact that he had faced the truth and emerged stronger for it. As John looked back on the emotional journey he had endured, he found himself reflecting deeply on the lessons learned through his experience. The betrayal that once consumed him had, in many ways, become a turning point, a painful but necessary catalyst for growth. He realized the importance of trusting his instincts, as ignoring the small signs of something amiss had allowed the situation to spiral unchecked. Equally important was his newfound understanding of self-respect and the need to prioritize his own emotional well-being. Through this journey, John came to see that life doesn't end in the wake of heartbreak. Whether someone chooses to walk away from a relationship or rebuild it, healing and happiness are always possible with time and effort. He acknowledged that while trust is fragile and difficult to restore, self-worth is a foundation that should never be compromised. In closing, John shared a message of hope and empowerment for anyone facing similar struggles. No matter how painful it feels in the moment, he reflected, life moves forward. It's up to you to take control of your story, to find strength in yourself, and to create a future that brings you peace and joy, whether that's with someone new or simply rediscovering the happiness of standing on your own. With these final words, John's story became more than one of betrayal and heartbreak. It became a testament to resilience, personal growth, and the unwavering human capacity to find light in the darkest of time. Thank you for being a part of this story with me if it moved. You please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Narrative Stories. I've noticed many of you who enjoy these stories aren't subscribed yet. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel. You're becoming part of a community that values deep, meaningful storytelling. Let's continue exploring these heartfelt journeys together. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you won't miss our next story.